All right, everyone. So in the last video, we were kind of talking about P5. We're now going to get into some general concepts, of computer graphics and programming. So we're going to use these concepts in P5, but these could really apply to a lot of programming languages. So it's not specific to P5. It's just kind of a general concept. Okay. So some of the things we're going to have to talk about, some of them are math based and some of them are some computer science concepts. Okay. The first is we're eventually going to be placing things on a canvas. Okay. So to understand how mathematicians and math people place things, we have to revisit this idea known as a coordinate plane. If that term sounds familiar, you might have, mentioned or talked about this in like high school algebra class or high school math kind of class, right? So there's this idea that if you want to place something in a two-dimensional space, which is something that has a width and a height, but not necessarily a depth, we can have what are called axes, okay? So we would call this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. Why? Because I said so. All right. So this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. Um, and the way that it works is that this is considered the origin, or 0, comma 0. And if you were to go to the right along the x-axis, this is the x-axis or the x value, this is the y value. This would be like, if you go one step, it'd be 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0. If you went to the left, that would be a negative value of -1, 0, -2, 0. The idea that if you went up and down, or vertically, that this would be positive, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. And if you go down, that's -1 and then -2. Okay. So the idea is that if I have any sort of point in space, I put a point here, or I put a point there, or there, or there, we can kind of use this system to figure out where the x and the y value is, right? And so here in this example, this is point A, and point A is at 1, 2 in the x direction, and then 1, 2 in the y direction, or a value of 2, 2. Okay. Here, this would be point B. This is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then up 5. So it's at a value of 10, 5. And then point C here is at 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we going down or going negative to point negative or to a -3 value here. Okay. So this is a traditional coordinate plane. When we work in programming, and more specifically when we deal with computers, the way that it works is that we really kind of work with just this plane, okay? And the way it usually works is that most computers start from the upper left-hand corner, kind of like, see, I'm drawing that little dot in the upper left-hand corner, and that is our origin, or 0, 0. And then you can go positively to the right, and then if you go down, we can still go down vertically, but that's actually considered positive instead of negative. So in other words, like if I did 1, 1, 1, 1 would be here. If I were to go up, you can't even see it because it's off of the screen. But if I went -1, that actually would go up in the y direction, and a -1 would go over to the left beyond this page in an x direction. Okay. So when we talk about, origin and positive and negative values when placing things on a screen, it's still the same concept. It's just a little different, where this is a positive x and this is a positive y, as opposed to a traditional where this going down would normally be a negative value. Okay. All right, that's just kind of a basic math kind of thing. Let's talk about some general concepts. in programming. And one is the sort of the idea of the function, okay? What is a function? Well, a function in programming is the function is a task or a group of tasks that that is your command is doing, okay? Your function can really do anything. I know that sounds very vague because, to be honest, it is. It's like a function could take two numbers and add them together. A function could create a circle. A function could, I don't know, take a number rounded to the nearest decimal place and then add two to it or whatever. I mean, it literally could be anything you want it to do. Okay. So we talked in the last video about, normally if you were to set up a document, there's kind of this default structure that you get with function setup and then function draw. These are actually functions. I'm not going to talk about them right now. We'll actually talk more about them. But notice how there's this function here. And this function is called create canvas. How can you tell that something is a function in JavaScript? In JavaScript, the way it's going to work is that if something is a function, there will be a function name, like, I don't know, round numbers or something like that. And then it'll always end with a parentheses, okay? So this is actually a function. It's called the create canvas function. What does it do? It creates a canvas or a visual canvas that we can draw onto, okay? There's another function called round. What does the round function do? It takes a value like 2.5 or 10.1 or whatever, number we want to put in there, and it will round it to the nearest number. Okay, that's what it does. So a function does something, okay, whatever that something is. Eventually, we'll be able to write our own functions, but for now, we're just going to use functions that are built into P5. So sometimes, let's use this. Let's pretend I have this create canvas function, right? What the create canvas function does is it makes a new document, right? When you make a new document in Photoshop or Illustrator or in Figma or Photopea or whatever, the first thing you really have to do is you have to give it a width and you have to give it a height, right? Otherwise, how does the program know what size you want your document, right? So in other words, what I'm trying to get at is you have to give it information, okay? When you want to give a function information in order to do its job, we call that an argument. Arguments are information used by the function. A lot of times, like your function needs sometimes information in order to do its job. So the way I kind of like to think of it, let's say we're in Google Maps, okay? I'm assuming everyone here has used Google Maps at least once in their life. And let's just say for the sake of argument, we're trying to get to San Francisco State University, okay? Now, if I want instructions, let's say I want instructions on how to get to point A to San Francisco State University, right? Well, the information that the program would need is, well, where are you starting from? Are you starting from, the mayor's office? Are you starting from Golden Gate Park? Are you starting from McLaren? You know what I mean? Like, it all depends, because if you're starting from different places in the city, then you're going to get different, values or different results, right? So in other words, the information that my program would need to do its job is, where are you starting from? So then I have like a starting place, and maybe I'm going from, I don't know, the mayor's office. Or I don't know. Is it the mayor's office? Capitol building? Let's do Hall of Justice because I'm just tired. Okay, but there you go, right? I have a starting place and then an end place, right? And then it can do its job because it has all the information it needs to be able to go from, to do the task, right? If it didn't have this information, it wouldn't have enough, it wouldn't have enough to do the task. So sometimes when you run a function, you're going to have to give it information, and that information is called an argument. So here in my let's say I want to build a canvas that is 300 pixels wide by 500 pixels tall. Okay. So in this case, 300 and 500 are both arguments. So these are arguments that work with the create canvas function. What does the arguments do? Well, in this case, they tell the computer or the program what, how big is the canvas going to be. So if I come in here, let me shrink it down, although that's going to make this move, but you can see now it's 300 by 500, right? If I decide later on that I want to have a different value, so maybe instead of 300 by 500, why don't we I want to make a canvas that's 400 by 400. I need to change those arguments, and changing those arguments will if I run it, will give me a different result, okay? So arguments are information that we give to a function. Some functions don't require arguments. Some functions are going to require information. It really depends on what the function does, okay? The final thing we're going to talk about is what's called a code block. And a code block is a group of tasks that are going to be run in sequential order, okay? So here in setup, this here is what's called a code block, okay? And what I can do is if I wanted to run multiple tasks. So right now what's happening is I'm creating a canvas that's 400 by 400. I want to set a background color, which I'm going to do by using another function called background. And don't worry about what I'm doing, but I'm just setting up a background color. And then I want to run another function, which is called circle, which we'll talk about in a second, but essentially it builds a circle. And if I run it, so really what's happening here is this is a code block. Remember, we said setup automatically runs at the beginning of your program. It's going to run all three of these functions, each of which has their own arguments, all at once. Okay. So if we run a code block, what we're really saying is we're going to create more than one, or we're going to run multiple functions or multiple lines of code. Okay. So these are just some more examples. I have a function called create canvas, and these are my arguments. So then it just becomes like, okay, we need to know what the functions are and how, what arguments they take. So we're going to start real simple. I'm just going to start with a circle. And a circle is a function that wait for it, builds a circle. And what it basically requires is it needs an X value. Remember, that's that coordinate place we were talking about. It needs an X value, a Y value, and then a diameter, which basically means how large it is. So what I'm going to do is come into here. So let's say I was starting off like this. Okay. I am going to build a circle by typing out circle. So it needs so before I do anything here, let me just play this. What is actually happening here is this is 0, 0. This is 400, 0. Or this is 0, 400. And this is 400, 400. Hopefully that gives you an idea. So in other words, like this would be 200x 0y. This would be 200, 200. Sorry, I keep putting a comma there, even though I shouldn't be doing that. All right, so let's say I want the circle in the middle. I would want about 200 in the x value and about 200 in the y value. So I'm going to put that in here. Circle, 200, 200. And then the final attribute, or sorry, not attribute, but argument would be the diameter. I'm going to hit play. And there you go. Okay. So I built a circle. It's a function. It requires arguments, which is the x value and the y value. Now I can run this function again. So what I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to build another circle. And this time I want to put it at a little bit farther on the right, which would be a higher x value, and a little bit further down, which would be a higher y value. So I'm going to say 300, 350. And when I play that, you can see I get an additional, it gets a little bit lower. The way that this works is that my JavaScript engine is running the arguments in sequential order. So what I mean by that is this is played, or this is run, then this is run, then this is run, and then this is run. Okay. So what I mean by that is, let's say, I'm just going to turn this off by getting rid of the code. So this is my original circle. And let's say that I do this 225, 225. So what should happen here is it should overlap. Because this is made after this, you got to think of it as like, like it built the canvas. This is actually placing a background color, which we'll talk in a little bit. This is placing that first circle, and then this is placing the next one on top of it. And if I were to add another circle on the next line like this, 250, 250, 50, X, Y, you can see it's overlapping, right? So if I wanted to change the order of things, changing the order would change how this goes. So if I were to switch this around, this is going to be made first, and then this is going to be made on top of it. So it's still overlapping, but now this one overlaps this as opposed to vice versa. This is actually setting up like a background color. And it's actually basically the way you should think of it. It's almost like a solid layer in Photoshop. So if I put this after this, it's actually going to block the items, because what's actually happening is this is being built first, this is being built second, and then this big rectangle is being built on top, and it's blocking everything. Okay. So when you write code, the order of your code is very, very important. Okay. When you guys test this stuff out, all right, so let's try a little bit of this out. I gave you guys some drills that you can kind of play with. If you want to save these are my files, and you're allowed to work with them, but if you want to save a copy of them, let me show you what to do. You're going to want to load in your own, save your, like do what I did where I said, say, create your own account, and you're going to want to basically duplicate mine and then save it. And then it should allow you to save a copy of your own. Otherwise, you're just working from mine. And if you close it, it won't save your changes. But anyway, this is exercise 1, and it's basically just kind of showing you how this works, where this is my function. I hit play, and normally what's going to happen here is you're going to get something that looks like this. I can change the values for the arguments there, and that changes the way that this works. Another example of this is background, as I mentioned, is a way of adding a background color. And the way that you can do that is you can write background, and then the value is a color, okay? There's a couple ways you could list color. You can list color as a name. Like I could type in, for instance, I'm going to type in the phrase yellow, okay? If you're going to use names like red, blue, yellow, something like that, just make sure that you put it in quotation marks. That's required for this. It's something called a string, which we'll talk more about later in the next module. But that's a value that we could do. If I wanted to make this like aqua, I'm going to stop, and then aqua. Okay. You can also use hexadecimal values. So just like how we used hexadecimal in CSS, we can also do that here. I'm just going to open up Google and I'm going to type in color picker, such. And what that's going to allow me to do is, let's say I really wanted to use this particular shade of green. That's the hexadecimal value. I'm going to copy that, go back here, and I'm going to paste that in. And you can see it's giving me that specific shade. Another way you could do this is by using what's called the RGB value. The RGB value is how much red, how much green, and how much blue makes up that particular color. You guys might remember that RGB is how computer screens and television screens build color. And the way that they do that is they basically use red, green, and blue light, mix the light together to form all of their colors. So let's say I wanted to use a very specific color, like maybe this red. In addition to using the hexadecimal value, you'll notice here it says 255,076. Those are my RGB values. 255 is how much red there is. The way it goes is it goes 0 to 255 for each value. So a 255 red is like a very red, has a lot of red in it. 0 amount for the red channel would be like lack of red, or so obviously there's a lot of red here, not a lot of green, and a little bit of blue. And I get this kind of fire engine red color here. So what I'm going to do is actually just copy this value, and I'm going to just put this in. If you're going to do RGB values, do not put them in quotation marks, just use commas like I'm doing here. All right, so the point I'm just trying to show you here is that I'm using functions, and we're using different arguments here to change it. Like I said, in my example, I was showing you how we can create circles. So if we go to the, I have the circle function. The circle function takes 3 arguments that are required, one called x, or an x value, a y value, and then a diameter. So I'll just add in circle 200, 250. I'm going to run this, and there's my circle. And like I said, you can run a function multiple times, a lot of times. So if I'm going to do this. This is going to add an additional. This is going to run the circle function twice and build another circle. And if I run it 3 times, I'm running the circle function 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Remember, it goes in procedural order. So this one goes first, second, and then third. And if I run it, this is my result. Okay. There's also a square function. It's very similar to the circle function. The difference is, instead of building a circle, it builds a square. And like the circle, we have to say where it's placed on the canvas, or an x, y value, and then how large it is, which we call it the diameter. So I'm going to go to create a square. And just like, it has the basic protocol setup, which means there's a setup and a draw function. I'm going to come in here, type in square, which is a function that builds a square. It takes 3 arguments, an x value, a y value, and then how large it is the diameter. So I'm going to place this in the center, which is 200, 200, and then let's give it a diameter of 75, let's say. I'm going to hit play, and then that builds my square. Okay. Just like with the circle, I can run this function multiple times. So let's hit stop, square, 100, 150. So what's going to happen is this square is going to be built first because it's, before it. Then this is going to be placed at 100x, 100y, which is about there, give or take. And it's going to be a little smaller than that one because it's a smaller diameter value. Okay. I'll make one more square. I don't know. Let me place it kind of in between. Let's make it really large, like 100. And if I run this, This is kind of, let me do this. So it's kind of overlapping like that. The reason why this is overlapping is, once again, this is my, it runs procedurally. This is built, then this, and then this. If I were to stop and reorder this, where this one comes first, you can see that this is done first, then this one's placed on top, and then that one's placed on top. And I get kind of a slightly different order here. So like I said, your order of operations or order of code does matter. It can change the way that your program works. So just be aware of that. Okay. All right. I want you guys just try that out. You can, these are from the module where it says at the very top, you can click where it says, the in-class drills. And like I said, if you want to make a copy, create your own P5 account and then make sure to duplicate mine. And then that way you can, duplicate and save a copy of them. Okay.